We're talking college sports in the Deep South where college football is king. The SEC is the best conference. The SEC West is the best subconference. And if you're on Thatch Avenue, Magnolia, or Shug Jordan Parkway, if you enter the city limits on exit 51 on 85, or maybe in exit 58, the battle cry is War Eagle. Once again, it's K-Stu the GOAT for Vernon Speak Sports, mostly talking about Auburn football and other sports. Want to give a shout out to my fearless and true gang. Let's go ahead and get the comment section active. War Eagle. Okay, so as we go into spring football, we're kind of sort of winding this thing up. Auburn is going into their last week, obviously, with the A-Day game coming up next weekend, which will be April the 13th. You should go online and look at all of the activities that will be surrounding the A-Day game. Always a nice event for the Auburn Tigers and a great event for the Auburn fan base. Now, as I give some espionage out of Eugene, Oregon, I've been kind of on a kick to where I want to see what the Oregon Ducks are talking about. When you talk about Eugene, Oregon, you talk about the Oregon Ducks who are projected to win the Pac-12 conference. This would be their first Pac-12 conference championship since 2014. Definitely a storied program. Looking at Marcus Mariota as a recent Heisman Trophy winner. Also, ironically, as we talk about the Advocare Classic that will be taking place between Auburn and Oregon, the first meeting between Auburn and Oregon taking place in the national championship game in 2010, which featured Cam Newton, the Heisman Trophy winner of that year. That game coming down to a last-second field goal in which Auburn won that ball game. But fast forward to 2019, got a lot of interesting developments in Eugene, Oregon. Obviously, the hire of Andy Avalos was absolutely phenomenal. And when you think about the Mario Cristobal has a lot of SEC ties. He was actually the offensive line coach for the University of Alabama. He actually was a colleague of Kirby Smart, was a offensive line coach, a part of the national championship 2015 University of Alabama football team. So he definitely has some ties in the South, especially as it relates to recruiting. And we're going to talk about that in a few seconds. But when we think about Oregon and where they're headed going into the 2019 season, you know, things are starting to develop to where you could probably kind of pitch a case for Oregon to be a Pac-12 winner this year in that conference. And maybe not even, maybe getting to the point where they could have some conversation as far as the college football playoff because of the talent that they're being able to acquire offseason. I think is absolutely phenomenal. Obviously, taking on one of the SEC powers, I think Auburn just did not live up to the build on last season. I think they're way better than what their 8-5 record would dictate. But hey, that's a whole nother story for the Auburn Tigers. But when you fast forward about 3,000, maybe even 4,000 miles to Eugene, Oregon, some great things happening, especially at the wide receiver position for Eugene, Oregon. Kind of similar to the versatility that you have at Auburn. You talk about guys like Daywood Davis at 6'1", Jalen Red at 5'8", Johnny Johnson 6 feet. Then you get a little bit taller at Brian Addison. I really like what I see at this kid on film, Justin Collins. Then you go back down height-wise, Justin Collins at 5'9", Brandon Schuler, who actually was a former safety, converted over to wide receiver, and Dimitri Birch at 6'2". Now, one of the things that I look at is you got a guy like Jalen Red, who is definitely a change of pace guy. He's a guy that was very active on film when you look at Oregon on last year, and definitely will bring some firepower to the Advocare Classic when Auburn meets Oregon August the 31st, 2019 in Arlington, Texas. That's going to be definitely a big recruiting perception thing down there in Arlington, Texas, especially with Oregon being a nationally renowned team. One of the reasons why they're renowned, they've had some appearances in the college football playoffs and national championship game recently. But my goodness, the variations of the uniform, when you think about today's generation just wanting to look cool in the uniform, you cannot bypass the fact that Oregon has definitely executed that. As a matter of fact, Oregon makes it very easy to make some nice cover thumbnails for these videos. Big shout out to the Oregon Ducks out of Eugene, Oregon. They played in Autzen Stadium, which they like to call that thing the zoo. And if you think about it, especially in night games, it gets very, very hostile in that environment. I'm kind of glad that Auburn is not playing this game in Autzen Stadium in Eugene, Oregon. And I'm sure likewise, I guarantee you, Oregon is definitely thankful that they don't have to play this thing in Jordan-Hare Stadium in the middle of SEC country. Now, when you look forward, especially with the wide receivers at Oregon, you talk about, guys that they have acquired. You talk about Juwan Johnson. This is probably one of my favorite news of the week for Eugene, Oregon. He was able to actually come along a little bit earlier for Oregon. He's a transfer out of Penn State. He actually had a breakout year his junior year, I think it was. He had about 700 yards. Things just didn't work out his last year. But he is very, very capable as a receiver. And I think in a different fast-paced environment, it could accentuate his skills to carry over into the NFL. He reminds me kind of not necessarily Randy Moss, but he kind of has those Randy Moss-ish tendencies. Also, adding Micah Pittman as well. So this is the reason why I mentioned this, is because this is going to test as to whether the Auburn Tigers have done a good job of upgrading their linebacker core, especially when you talk about range and you talk about guys like, Michael Harris and, Zacoby McClain and the addition to Owen Papo. That range is going to definitely be tested in the intermediate side of a part of the football field, because with this aerial attack that's going to be coming at Auburn, Justin Herbert, the quarterback for Oregon, obviously going to be in everybody's top 10 to be a Heisman Trophy quarterback this year. And as he continues to upgrade receiver-wise, this thing could definitely happen given the outcome of the season. But either way, this is going to severely test the Auburn's secondary and their linebacker core. And it's also going to challenge the Buck linebacker position, which is kind of like a hybrid defensive end. We kind of think that Nick Cole would take on that role, or maybe even Big Cat Bryant, or maybe even Marlon Davidson. We will see. But either way, it's going to definitely be a nice aerial attack from Oregon coming against Auburn. Now, this will definitely not be too much new for the Auburn Tigers, because Auburn, what I look at this as is kind of similar to what Auburn faced against Ole Miss when you had Tamu as the quarterback and you had an onslaught of receivers. And Ole Miss did have a good portion of production against Auburn, but of course Auburn won that game. So be on the lookout for this particular storyline out of Oregon with the wide receiver. I'm talking about they have about 9 wide receivers that could be very productive this year. And that gives a lot of depth and that gives a lot of options as far as creativity for the offensive coordinator staff for the Oregon Ducks. Now, once again, you have Auburn and Oregon, the second year in a row that Auburn has played a Pac-12 team in a neutral site ball game. Last year playing Washington in the Chick-fil-A Kickoff Classic in Atlanta, Georgia. Washington also wound up as the Pac-12 champions last year. Oregon has the same aspirations coming into 2019. Auburn and Oregon will face in the Advocare Classic in the beautiful stadium in Arlington, Texas. Will be an exciting venue for both teams involved. Once again, it's K-Stu the GOAT for Vernon Speak Sports. Mostly talking about Auburn football. We love the SEC, and we think the SEC West is the powerful sub-conference in the SEC. Go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and also get involved with the comment section. The Fearless and True Gang, they get real live in that comment section. Also had a few Oregon fans that have joined the as affiliates to the Fearless and True gang. They haven't converted over, of course. It's Go Ducks for the Oregon Ducks, of course, out in Eugene, Oregon. Like I said before, subscribe to my channel, War Eagle.